Alrighty, hello. Welcome back. Hope everybody had a pleasant spring break. It's doing that thing again where it's got you in the waiting room, but you're already in. Alrighty. So again, good afternoon. Welcome back. All right, this is crunch time. We have in 2 weeks you're going to be doing the Georgia milestones. So we got a lot to do, no time to waste. I do want to do ecology today with you because there's a lot of information about ecology on the exam, and then I'll give you some time to work with the review questions. Hopefully you spent some time with that. I do want to remind you, let me go back to the home page. Okay. Um, of this mandatory check-in. Okay. You all have to do this. Okay, so hopefully your other teachers for your other subjects have reminded you, but you all need to make sure that you pick one of these days, either April the 7th, which is tomorrow, or this Friday to go over to the gym at St. Mary's to have your Chromebook checked. Okay, so please make sure that you make arrangements to to do one of those things, go on one of those days. Okay. Very important. In-person technology readiness check has to be done, folks. So make sure that you set up to do that. All right, who am I missing? Missing quite a few people. But like I said, folks, we are in crunch time. I really don't have time to wait on late people. Those of you who come on time, y'all will get started with what needs to be done. We are on focus mode, so you do need to be on camera. Don't have to be hiding. I got three people on camera. Everybody else is off camera. All right. And I don't have time to argue with you. And like I said, this is your grade. This is your subject. You all need to learn to cooperate. On camera, folks. On camera. On camera. All right. So again, we are going to spend every day prepping for the exam. What we're doing today is actually prepping for the exam because we have not actually done this unit, but it is on the exam. So we want to make sure that you spend some time with it. And I'm going to kind of go through it real quickly. And after the exam, we'll come back and touch on some things in more detail. But you do need to know certain things about ecology. So that's where I am in Canvas. That's where I'd like for you to be in Canvas. And I'd like for you to be on camera. We will have some assignments this week that need to be turned in, but probably just one because our main focus is to review for the next 2 weeks. So I don't want to get behind in mandatory assignment because you're supposed to have so many grades per week. So we are going to have one or two, but the main focus is review. So there'll be practice worksheets that you'll have to do. Okay. All right. Hopefully everybody is here in Canvas. We're on ecology. And again, this is milestone prep. We have not done this unit, but this unit is on the milestone. All right, so they talk about the butterfly effect. Hopefully, you've heard about what the butterfly effect is. And they call it a metaphor, but it refers to the fact that um, butterflies, when they flap their wings, they create they stir the atmosphere. The air around them is disturbed a little bit. And so just their one motion affects other things. So in our lives, the things we do affect someone else. I always refer to the Lion King and the circle of life. Um, and we're going to talk about what does the circle of life mean? I think we might have touched on it earlier in the year. I can't remember is this or environmental science. But to understand what the circle of life means is that everything one organism does on the planet affects other organisms on the planet. So we need to look at what effect do we have, what effect do other organisms have on us. So when we look at that, we're going to look at the as what we call the organization of life, and you need to understand what that is. We're going to look at how that affects energy flow, not so much because when you all think of energy, you think of the light bill or the gasoline in the car, but we're looking at more when organisms feed. And you need energy, you need to eat, and you need to gain energy. So, how that affects and how much energy actually is transferred as you go through the system. So we're going to look at a pyramid of living things and look at what the effect again of one level on the next level as we go through an ecosystem. We have a lot of vocabulary to look at: niche and nutrient cycles, different communities, populations, and issues that we have on our environment. Okay, we are very instrumental in some of the changes that go on our environment. So if you see this list right here, it is a very long list of vocabulary. And again, in preparing for an exam, I would go through vocabulary. I would spend some time reading vocabulary, all the vocabulary sections at the beginning of each of these, because even if you had to guess at an answer, if you know what the word means, you can make an educated guess as to what the answer should be. And so if the words are not coming out at you from left field, you should be successful at answering some of these questions, okay? Most of you did okay on the benchmark tests, and that's a good indicator of what you might be able to do on the milestone. But some of you did not do so well, and you need to go back and look at the your summary, and it gives you a breakdown of the areas that you were weak in, and you need to go back and look at questions that pertain to that. Come back to Canvas and look at topics that pertain to the areas where you missed a lot of questions. Okay. Again, the test is in 2 weeks. It is 20% of your grade. It is important, important, important that you prepare yourself for this exam. Okay. Don't just show up the day before and try to take the test cold. You need to prepare yourself for this exam. And again, some of you who are missing assignments, like I got about 3 of you who have no grades at all right now. And this is 20% of your grade. You need to make sure that your class grade is as high as you can get it. So if you don't do well on this and it pulls your grade down, you're still going to pass the class. Okay, so this is important, important, important. Can't stress that enough. So again, this list of vocabulary words, like I said, this is a very long list. Spend some time with it. Know what they mean. All right, for starters. And again, this is review for the exam as well. All right, we have what we call levels of organization. When we started off, way back when, we looked at levels of organization starting with the cell. We define all living things are made of cells, and cells work together with each other and they make tissues. So you have tissues, you have skin tissue, eye tissue, liver tissue, and those tissues then work together to make an organ. And then the organs in your body work together with other systems, and then those systems create an organism. Okay, so a functioning organism is um, is organized from the cell is the simplest thing to tissues, to organs, to organ systems, to organism. That brings us to the bottom of this list. Okay, so the organization of living things is what I just said. This is the organization of ecology. So notice, like I said, an organism is the bottom of this one. So I took you to that point. And an organism is an entire living thing. Okay, it can be unicellular, it can be multicellular. We are multicellular. Um, and it lives in the same location and can, and this is important, can interbreed, okay, to make others of its own kind. So that's what makes something an organism by definition. So again, learn the definition because they could ask you questions about, give you an example, which is what the test keeps doing. And they will ask you, is this an organism? Is this a population? Is this a community? So again, it is lives in one place. All of these organisms live in the same place and they can interbreed with each other, okay? And make more of its own kind. A lot of things can interbreed and then they make something that's not of their own kind and then they end up being sterile because most, or they don't survive, okay? So, um, all right, so you have a group of individuals that live in the same place of the same kind, and they make up a population. So now I'm going to go up the list. So we start off with one kind of thing, an organism, and now we have a group of that one kind of thing. Okay, same species, and they live in the same area. Okay, so that's like you, we are human beings. You live in your house. That's the same place. You're still humans, and that makes up a little population. Then we look at the population of humans in your neighborhood. And that's going to be a little different than this word community up here, but still, we're going to have you live in your house and your neighbors live in the house and the people next door, and all of you live in the same place. So that's a community. Same thing like with birds and plants and things. If they live in the same place, then they are part of the community. Okay. Up to this point, we're only talking about living things. Okay. All these things are living things. So they give you the example, animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, they all live in the forest. Okay. And that's one place. Then we talk about an ecosystem. Now we're talking about other things incorporated. Now we're talking, and we're going to use that word that they have down here, biotic and abiotic. Biotic means it's a living thing. Abiotic means it's not a living thing. So things that are not living are like your rocks, the water, the air in the sky, the sunshine, the soil. All of those things are abiotic factors, but they are important things to the ecosystem. So you look over here, it says the algae and the plants and the animals, as well as the wind, the minerals, the rocks, the water, the weather. All of that is included in the ecosystem. Okay, and when later on when we finish this, we're going to do an ecosystem project, and you will decide which ecosystem you want to work on, and it will depend on the kind of weather in the area, location on the planet will all determine what kind of ecosystem the organisms in that area are. Okay. Um, so then we have a lot of ecosystems on the planet. We have desert ecosystems, we have aquatic ecosystems, we have terrestrial ecosystems. They all live on the planet, and so the whole planet is called the biosphere. Okay, so we start with one individual down here at the bottom, a group of individuals of the same kind are a population, but in a community, you have several kinds of populations. We have the dogs, the cats, the trees, the birds, you, and you all live in the same place, so that makes it a community. And then that community is located somewhere on the planet, so that's an ecosystem. But that ecosystem includes the dirt that the trees are living in, the water that they need, the pond that the animals in the area drink from, the air in the sky, the sunshine, the anything that's not living is also included in ecosystem. So it's important to remember these first three do not include abiotic factors. And so anything that is not living, bio means living. Anything that is not living is an abiotic factor. So these top two include abiotic factors. Okay, and each of these are a group within a group. So it gets bigger as we go up. Sometimes you see this as a pyramid, or you just see it like this picture up here, where you start off and they give this as an individual human, and then you have a group of people, you have a group of people that live in community with the trees and the birds and everything else, and then those live in a particular location on the planet, so that's your ecosystem. And then all of the ecosystems, the biosphere has the biosphere has different levels to it as well. The hydrosphere is all the water places. The atmosphere is everything that lives in the air and all the gases and things that are involved in the air. The ecosystem is more the land. Um, the, the ecosphere is more of the land, terrestrial planets, and lithosphere is like the layers of the earth. And you might have talked with that about it in earth science somewhere along the way. All right, biomes. A biome is defined by its climate and location. So we have aquatic biomes and terrestrial biomes. You either live on this planet, you either live in the water or you live on the land. Okay? But there are different kinds of aquatic biomes. So estuaries are areas um, where they're kind of in between the ocean and fresh water. So they kind of have a mixture of water. So you need to know what the definition of that is. And we have swamps or other what excuse me. They're fresh water areas, but they're not like in the woods, but they are where trees and things grow in a watery environment. Okay. Then we have all the different types of terrestrial environments. So you want to click on those. We live, let me get this person in. They're late. All right, we live in a coniferous forest area. Actually, we live in a deciduous forest biome, and that is where the temperature range, and lately the temperature range has been wacky, but this is the general temperature range for our location. We have pine trees. We have trees that have cones on them, so coniferous forest area. We have an average precipitation per year. And the vegetation, we have evergreen trees, trees that produce cones and needles and remain on the trees all year long. So that's one type of area. Next one, the desert. So again, all of these biomes are defined by temperature and rainforests. So they give you an average temperature, they give you an average precipitation, and because of those two, it determines what kind of vegetation will exist there and the type of animals that exist there as well. And then they give you the location on the planet as far as where you would find this type of environment. Next one, grasslands, kind of in the Midwest. Again, temperature and precipitation are going to be the first things because that's how they're defined. All biomes are defined by temperature and precipitation. Shrubland, rainforest. Actually, this is where we live. So this first one, sometimes they call this tundra. So that's kind of like in Canada, but this is where we live, the temperate deciduous forests. This is, and the difference is while we do have some pine trees and things like that, we have more maple trees and leaves that drop their leaves. Okay, so temperate deciduous forest is defined by the fact that the trees tend to drop their leaves in the wintertime and then grow them back in the spring and summer. But again, temperature and precipitation is how they are classified. And tundra, really, really cold. Okay, and they don't have, because they don't have much precipitation, they don't have much trees. They have permafrost, so just things that can grow, short roots will grow there. But again, temperature and precipitation dictates what lives there and what doesn't live there. All right, so this would be a map. So we'll see this map again. Like I said, at the end of after the exam, we're going to do a biome project. So you're going to be familiar with this map and you're going to pick a biome and you're going to need to know where it is on the planet and, and talk about that. All right, so these are the two words I was mentioning earlier. You need to know what the biosphere is. Abiotic factors are non-living conditions, and they include soil, water, air, oxygen, carbon dioxide, temperature, sunlight. So in other words, pollution can be an abiotic factor. All right, biotic factors are all the living things. And the living things include the microscopic things that we don't think about: bacteria, fungi, algae, um, plants, and regular plants and animals. All of that make up our biotic factors. All right, so you look at this picture and you go through and look at all of these things. So the bird is biotic. I guess this is just air, or this is also air. This is an animal, so it's biotic. This is the ground or the water, so it's abiotic. That's a plant, so it's biotic. Monkey is a biotic, or orangutan. All right, orangutan. So again, go through and review these things and be familiar with the vocabulary. And like I said, I'm going to go through these kind of quick, but you need to spend some time learning what the vocabulary is. A niche. A niche is a vocabulary word. A niche is where you do what you do and how you do it. And there's two types of niches, what they call a fundamental niche, and is the range of conditions that a species can potentially tolerate and the range of resources that they can potentially use. All right, so what that means is, like I said, a niche is where you live, what you do in that space, and how you function in your own space. Like your house is your niche, and everything you do in your house is about functioning in that location. Um, a niche can be the leaf on a tree. And when we talk about niches, sometimes there are organisms that live on the top of the leaf. There are organisms that live on the bottom of the leaf. So they can have the same location and a different niche. Okay, so a tree dweller has a different, that tree is in the ground in that one location, but somebody lives at the top of the tree, something lives at the bottom of the tree. They have a different niche. So it's where you live and what you do in that particular space. All right, so there's a range of conditions that allow you to function at your best in that particular location. So that is your fundamental niche, and you need certain things in that area: water, soil, food, in that area in order for you to function at your best. Then it says realized niche is the range of resources that they actually use and is a result of competition. So in other words, there could be a big lake there and there could be a whole bunch of organisms that live in the area, but if you're in competition with other organisms and you never get to use it, like they're always fighting with you, um, to have access to that, then your realized niche is much smaller resource than your fundamental niche. So fundamental niche is what is actually available, and I mean, sorry, is yeah, what is actually available to you, and the realized niches is actually what you get to use. Okay, so when they say actual uses, you can have the whole grocery store is yours, but you don't use it all, and you can only use what you can afford to buy, kind of thing. So while all the resources are there, only exactly what you use will be your realized niche. Okay. Then we have another word here, habitat, niche versus habitat. All right, so a habitat is where the organism lives in its environment. Example, a snake lives in a grassy meadow. Okay. The niche is what the snake does in that grassy meadow. Okay, so his role in the grassy meadow, it would be his niche. So it's what he does, where he does it. All right, give me 1 second. I have to. So you all read this page over. I have to see what this person wants. All righty, sorry about that. Hopefully you were reading while I was taking care that I have someone in the hospital and they keep calling me. Gotcha. All righty. All right. So again, hopefully you were. So it's important that you understand that these are two different vocabulary words and understanding the difference between them, especially habitat and niche. So like for example, the habitat is the ocean. They got a lot of things in the ocean. Certain organisms are scavengers in the ocean, and that is their niche. They live on the bottom. Some live in the rocks. Some just live on the top of the water. So where they do what they do in that location, that's their niche. Okay. What resources they actually get to like I said, there's a lot of fish in the sea. There's a lot of organisms. They could be swimming around all the time and somebody beat them to the punch, and they could starve because they're not fast enough or well enough to compete with other things in their ecosystem. to make themselves available of the resources. All right, so make sure that you're familiar with those things. All righty. Energy flow. So we talked about energy flow. And there are different cycles. You've probably done the water cycle before, so you've done the preliminary water cycle in that you know about precipitation, evaporation, and condensation. Everybody learned that in elementary school. But as you see from this diagram, there's a whole lot more going on in this cycle than just evaporation, precipitation, and condensation. So we're concerned as to where the water goes when it falls out of the sky. So it can it can be ice if it's up here, but then the ice can melt and it runs down the mountain and then it runs back into the stream. And we go from being um, solid water, which is the ice, to liquid water, to being gaseous water. Okay, so we go through all the states of matter just in this one cycle. So we need to know what's going on. Some of it gets stored in the rocks. Some of it is runoff. We need to know what they mean by runoff. We need to know transpiration is something that the plants, we perspire, but the plants also give off water. So we call that transpiration. Okay. So study that diagram. And they call that the hydrolytic because it deals with water. Hydro means water. So that is the hydrolytic cycle. And this is the carbon cycle. And again, folks, I'm kind of brushing over this a little quickly because we've got a lot to review, but I need you to come back and spend a little more time studying each of these, learning the vocabulary words. So the carbon cycle, the base of the carbon cycle is how do we get carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere? So that's why it's right up here at the top of the picture. And let me change the way I'm looking at this. Okay. All right. So I can see what I'm circling. Okay. All right. And it is what they say it is. It's a cycle. It's a continuous. And again, when I was talking about the circle of life, if any one of these spots in the cycle is disturbed, it upsets the whole thing. Okay? All right, for example, back here, if there's no water in the ocean, then that's not going to happen. But if we talk about a lake or a pond, and I was watching the news the other day, we are in a drought cycle. So it affects the humidity in the air, how much water vapor is actually in the air. So one part of the cycle affects the other part of the cycle. If there are no clouds, if there's no evaporation, there's not going to be any clouds, there won't be any rain. Okay, so one thing affects the other. Part of the circle of life. Down here, we have our circle starts in the atmosphere, and then the important things about the trees is they absorb carbon dioxide during photosynthesis. And that's another part you need to use. Photosynthesis, we talked about that earlier. When we talk about photosynthesis and respiration being cycles that are opposite of each other. So the trees photosynthesize, take in the carbon dioxide, and then they make carbohydrates out of it. So they make food, and then the animals eat the food, but they also exhale carbon dioxide. So it's possible that the carbon dioxide can return back to the atmosphere with the plants and animals. I mean, the plants and animals, because trees go through respiration as well, so they're going to give it back. So that's one cycle. Things that die and stay in the ground, they become stored carbon. Okay. Then they become the gasoline and the coal that we use in the factories. And then the factories burn the fossil fuels and send carbon dioxide back into the air. So again, carbon dioxide can go back from the humans, it can go back because we're burning down all the trees, or it can get back in the air because the plants carry out respiration, send it back, or the factories that provide our power plants can send it back into the air. Okay, but again, if we chop down all the trees over here, then we have nothing to send back over here. Or if we do too much of this, there's too much carbon dioxide. And we said too, carbon dioxide is what keeps our planet warm. Other planets don't have this, and so that's why they're cold. But if we put too much, we do too much burning and we release too much stuff back into the atmosphere, then our little blanket gets too warm. And this is what we're having now is global warming, whereas all this excess carbon dioxide, which is not being used by the trees because we've chopped all the trees down to make all these new houses that we're making. Because in my neighborhood, every other lot has just been cleared and they're building houses on it. And so there's a whole lot of trees that are not removing carbon dioxide out of the air. And so that disturbs this cycle. All right, nitrogen cycle. It does involve the atmosphere, but it is more important about what's going on underground and in the animals than what's happening in the air. Remember too that nitrogen is we breathe oxygen and we think oxygen is the big deal in the atmosphere, but nitrogen is actually the most abundant gas in the air. We just inhale it and we exhale it back out. While we need it, we don't get it because we inhale it. We get it because we eat plants or we eat animals. And remember when we were talking about our macromolecules, proteins come from the hamburger you ate or the chicken you ate or whatever meats that you ate had the proteins in it. But protein, one of the major things about a protein is it has nitrogen in it. So that's how we get our nitrogen. So if we don't eat, we don't get nitrogen. So it is taken into, and notice where this arrow starts. Nitrogen in the atmosphere is taken in the roots of plants. Okay, so there are nitrogen fixing bacteria that break down, they live on the roots of the plants and they break down the nitrogen so the plant can use the nitrogen. And then the rabbit eats the plants. Or the plant dies and then the decomposers break down the nitrogen that's in the plant. Okay, and then the ammonia is in the soil and it gets turns into nitrates and nitrites. Some of that goes back into the atmosphere. Some of it is absorbed by the plants and the cycle starts all over again. So this one's a little more complicated, but the most important thing to remember is the nitrogen that's in the atmosphere isn't going directly, is not inhaled by the plant and it's not inhaled by the animals. It has to go in, be absorbed by the soil, transformed into a form that it can be used by the plant, and either the animal eats it or the plant use it and you eat the plant that has the nitrogen in it. Okay, so that's about it. But we need that for protein, so you need your nitrogen. So you need to read up on that. All right, so those are two cycles that you need to go through. And what time is it? Because I want to give you some time to practice. All right, so always look at the before you go part. The difference between habitat and niche. Habitat is where the organism lives, such as, and that would be like your house, the building, the forest, the block you live on. That's your habitat. The niche is what you do in that location, in that environment. Okay, what you actually eat in that environment, what your job is in that environment. How do you maintain, what you do to maintain or disturb that environment, what you remove from the environment, that's the niche, right? Is energy recycled? And it says no, but technically it is, because this is energy here. Okay, we use the energy. It dissipates as it goes up the food chain, and we're going to talk about that in a little while. So it's not recycled, but it is passed on from one level to the next. 3 major nutrients in the cycle are water, carbon, and nitrogen. Nitrogen fixation is important because that is the way nitrogen gas from the atmosphere gets to the organisms. Most of the Earth's water is located in the oceans. However, of this water, only 1% is fresh water. So there's a lot of water on the planet, but it's locked up in glaciers and groundwater. So of the 96%, only this little bit over here is available to us as fresh water. All right, energy flow. This is the part I was wanting to, let's see what this little video has to say.
Coral reefs are usually found in tropical waters, near the surface, because the coral needs energy from the sun to survive. The plants and algae there convert light energy into chemical energy through photosynthesis. As fish and other creatures eat the algae, and each other, energy is passed on through the food chain. The reef could not exist without coral. Each small circle of coral, or polyp, is made up of many coral organisms. The brown spots here are plant cells. They live inside the coral organisms. The plant cells collect energy from the sun through photosynthesis. This provides oxygen and sugar for the coral organisms to feed on. As the organisms grow, the polyp forms a compartment of calcium carbonate mineral. The polyps each live in their individual compartments, like neighbors in an apartment building. Each polyp has a mouth surrounded by stinging tentacles. During the day, the coral's algae cells photosynthesize. But at night, the polyps extend their tentacles to feed on plankton, tiny organisms that drift in the water. Meet another creature that feeds on plankton. The spiny blenny watches for plankton that may drift close enough to be snatched and eaten. When this parrotfish takes a large bite of coral rock, it is actually to feed on the polyps. The fish is able to extract the living coral by chewing it up with its extra set of internal jaws. Parrotfish create much of the sand at the bottom of the reef. The sea cucumber eats the sand and collects algae and organic debris from it. Creatures like the sea cucumber make sure the reef's floor stays clean. The ruffled sea slug, like the coral organism, has a double diet. It both eats plants and gets energy from the sun. The ruffles on its back act like a solar collector. They are filled with chloroplasts, the organelles that also carry out photosynthesis in plant cells. The slug spends less time looking for food because it can get energy from the sun in the daytime. Were it not for the plant eaters, or herbivores, the reef might be overgrown with algae. The long-spined sea urchin helps keep the algae in check. By day, it stays close to the coral. Its mouth is conveniently located on its underside for easy grazing. The urchin is well protected, but less fortunate herbivores must watch out for flesh-eating or carnivorous predators. The great barracuda cruises overhead, hunting at dawn and at dusk. The moray eel is generally nocturnal and spends its days lurking in caves. It comes out at night to feed on small fish. The yellowtail snapper may not look like much, but it is a mighty hunter. Of all the predators in the reef, it is the most abundant. One day, this predator too may become prey, or it may die of old age and make a meal for a scavenger. In the coral reef, as in all ecosystems, energy will have flowed from the sun to the plants, to herbivores, to carnivores, to scavengers, and decomposers.
Okay, so again, that video went through all of the different things that are existing in this one aquatic ecosystem. Okay, but the energy always starts with the sun, and that's the important thing to me. When the question asks you about energy, where does energy originate? The sun. It's the original first place of the energy, and the energy is then absorbed and used by plants. Plants is the next step as we go through our little energy pyramid. Plants is the next step. And then the plants, let's see what this one picture. All right, this one is aquatic. So the plants that they have at the bottom are called phytoplankton. Another vocabulary, there's different kinds of plankton. Phytoplankton are plants, aquatic microscopic plants. And there are certain organisms that are filter feeders, which means they just swim through the water and the plants just go through their gills or their mouth and they pull out the plants that way. Next level, see, this is plankton again. These are microscopic animals. So they are zooplankton. So know the difference between zooplankton and phytoplankton. But notice there are a whole lot more plants on the planet than there are animals. So the base of the pyramid is going to be wide as always. It doesn't matter what kind of ecosystem. The base will always be plants and it will always be wide. That's why they use a pyramid, because the bottom of the pyramid is wide. So whatever's at the bottom, there's more of them on the planet. So there's a lot fewer zooplankton than there are phytoplankton. And then we come up to and notice this little skinny piece here. Then we have the fish. They eat the zooplankton. And then we have these guys up here. There's fewer of them, but they are kind of like the ones that catch everything going by. Okay. So that's that one. Closing this. All right, again, energy, there's a whole lot more energy at the bottom of a pyramid, and it gets less and less as you go up to the top. Okay, by 10%, there's something called the 10% rule. So each level, because what they eat, they use some of the energy, and then what they store in their bodies is what the next level can eat. So only 10% of what they actually took in is going to be passed on to the next level. So 90% of the energy you consume is used for running your body. And then last one. All right, these are vocabulary words that you need to be aware of. Primary consumers, probably producers. Producers, plants are the only ones that produce their own food by photosynthesis. And again, they're at the bottom of the pyramid because there's a whole lot more of them. And they have a lot of calories or a lot of energy because there's a lot of them. They get their energy directly from the sun. Then we have everybody else is a consumer, but they are labeled by what they consume. So the consumers that eat the plants are your primary consumers. The consumers that eat the animal that ate the plant are your secondary consumers. And your consumers that pretty much eat plants or animals are at the top. And again, notice how this number, 10% rule, notice how the number went down by 10% each time. So we had 10,000 here, we have 1,000 here, take away 10%. And the easy way to remember this too is to drop a zero. Okay, so we take a zero off of this 10,000, we end up with 1,000. You take a zero off of that one, we end up with 100. Take a zero off of that, we have 10 calories. So with that 10% rule, just remember, keep taking, as you go up the pyramid, drop a zero. Okay, and that'll help you with that one. That's the cheat sheet rather than doing all the math. That's the cheat sheet for looking at the energy as you go up. You just have to remember the 10% rule. All right, I'm going to stop there, give you a few minutes to work on a review question. I need to do attendance before y'all disappear on me. And one or two of you might need to do some makeup work, but I need you to work on Who did a dichotomous key? That shouldn't have been, I don't know who did that, but I will talk about dichotomous keys next time. But what I want you to do is go back to the end of the last module and work on, did I have it on here? Where did I hide it? Did I not put it in the module? That's why. All right, so I want you to work on this. If you need me to, and I'll put this link in the chat in case you don't know how to get to it. All right, so before you go today, work on at least 1 or 2 questions in case you had not worked on them over the break. You want, you need, and again, the study guides have answers. If you work on a practice test, you're actually just trying to go through that. And so I'll do a practice test with you, but do the study guides because the study guides give you not just the question, but they give you a breakdown as to why the answer is the answer. And that's important because they're not going to ask you the same question the same way on the test that you're actually going to take. So you want to be familiar with what the way they ask the questions and what the answers could be. Again, spend some time reading this list over here because this goes through all of the topics that are going to be on the test, and it gives you a summary of what is involved and the vocabulary words that you need to be familiar with. So again, spend some time with this before you sign out today. We got 10 minutes, so don't go anywhere because I haven't done attendance yet. But do use this time to read. Again, you need to prepare yourself for this test. So use class time to do class work. I'll keep saying that. Use class time to do class work. If you bother to log in, make your presence count. Don't log in and take a nap. And do try to be on time for class. About 5 of y'all are consistently late all the time. And we're not going to wait for you because we do have a lot to do. The tutorial is starting back up this week. So Tuesdays and Fridays, if you need some extra help, a couple of you will be assigned mandatory tutorial because you didn't do so hot on the benchmark. So we will assign you to come and spend some time working on some mandatory questions. There's one. And again, if you come in, sign in, and then sign out and then mark you absent, that's because you did not stay to the end. Okay. So don't do that. I got one person, I don't know why. Um, how did he do that? All right, so I do see that the dichotomous key is open for you all to do, so we'll look at that next and talk about how to properly look at our other classification system and how to properly use a dichotomous key. Vocabulary, more vocabulary, lots more vocabulary. Okay, folks. We can go ahead and wrap it up for today, and I'll see you on Wednesday.